All right, we are live now. What's up, YouTube? Project Nerd HQ here. This is a little different than the format that I'm usually doing with Alex on Instagram. So I'm going to get Alex in here. Should have had some music to start off with, but hey, we're learning. So yeah, we get Nick in here. Boom, boom, boom. Just so you guys know, like I said, this is going to be an open panel discussion. We're going to keep it clean, trying to cultivate a community of acceptance. Where is Nick? Where is Alex? Bam, 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 bam. All right. All right, Nick, if you can hear me, click the link in the chat. I'm gonna post it again. Click the link in the chat. That way you could join up. You click the link in the chat. In the YouTube chat. Did you see it yet, Nick? Come on, guys. You're making me look bad. Where are my friends at? Nick, you good, man? Message me on IG if you're having an issue with it. Oh, there he is. There he is. There you go. You hear me, Nick?
Hey, how are you? Can
Awesome.
you hear me?
Wait, hold on. My headphones. I didn't plug my headphones in. All right, I can hear you now.
Awesome.
What's up, brother?
It's a mirrored thing. So when I move, I got to move the opposite way to what I think I move.
Nah, it's cool. It's cool. I'm just waiting for Alex to join. He was just finishing up, like getting ready. He was actually finishing Judas and the Black Messiah, that movie on Fred Hampton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a new format. Normally, this type of setup through StreamYard is how the Nick, like what I've been on with the Nick community, as I've sent you different things talking about sports. So I'm trying to build the same thing over here on my channel, having like weekly discussions. Open it up to everyone. That's where you could just. It's so simple and easy. It's a lot easier than trying to figure out what was wrong with the stream last time. It was literally internet problems, slow in on my part. But your voice came out beautifully, though.
Well, at least there's that, I guess.
At least there's that. So, did you see any of the CPAC film? Any of the highlights?
Well, let me just put it this way. It is great to be here on this live.
Mhm.
It's not Cancun, but it is great to be here on this live.
Awesome. So, for people that missed the last time or didn't watch the last time we discussed, just a brief intro, if you don't mind, about yourself, if you can. Was that Captain America you have in the back? Right
There?
up, right up. Yeah.
Yeah, that is Captain America.
Awesome. I guess I'm not the only one a child at heart. Awesome.
That was so I went to see a film a couple of years ago, and there was like a skill machine,
Mm-hmm.
and my friend put like $25 into one of them to try and get something, and then there were two different ones, and one of them, it was like a guaranteed chocolate. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll just put $1 in and get the guaranteed chocolate. And on the first go, I pulled out Captain America. So that
Hey,
was like
hey, you beat the system.
bragging
That's
rights. It was
yeah,
bragging
that's how you
rights.
beat the system.
That's
My
it.
partner and I went out to, some boardwalk. I was in Atlantic City, and they had like little games like that, like the claw. You know, they always get you for your money. Sometimes they make it look like you can win, but you really can never win. Fix my mic real quick.
I'm so used to Zoom that this is throwing me off a little bit with the mirror. So that's all
What do
right.
you
I'll
mean?
get used to
Oh
it.
well, were both of us like side to side?
Well, no, just the fact that all my movements are backwards. In Zoom, it's
Oh, I
flipped.
see what
So,
you're saying. I see what you're saying.
but
Hold
yeah,
on, give me a
so
second. Just tighten up my mic.
I will like in terms of an introduction to myself, I'm a PhD candidate, and I'm looking at the political economy and sociology of housing in the post-financial crisis era, which is now more complicated. Before the start of 2020, it was already pretty complicated, but with the advent of COVID and the pandemic and the pandemic crash and the further transfer of wealth from the working class to the 1%, it's even more complicated. And so I've been sort of studying that. And before that, I did a master's thesis in behavioral studies on conspiracy narratives in contemporary society. So I was looking at the ways in which people use conspiracy theories to supplement their knowledge of the world in order to be able to, it was what I found was that conspiracy theories were useful for people who had become disengaged from contemporary politics. So it filled a gap. But I finished that, submitted that, and was awarded my master's thesis before Pizzagate. So I would say that Pizzagate really altered everything. And then Pizzagate grew into QAnon. And it's kind of like what I defined as a conspiracy theory in 2013, 2014 versus what is called a conspiracy theory in 2021 two very different things. And QAnon has really dumbed everything down. Like the fact that snow doesn't melt perfectly when you set it on fire is a conspiracy theory that Bill Gates has cooked up to trick people into thinking that climate the climate crisis is real, is completely nonsense. So, I mean, it's hard to kind of keep track on that, but I'm looking more at like the ways in which these political dynamics kind of converge and work together to impact day-to-day life in contemporary society. And I'm using housing as a basis for that because if you've ever looked at Maslow's hierarchy of need, food, shelter, water is the foundation for that. So if we can't access that, then you're never going to get to self-actualization or love. And it's important to get there. In order to pay rent, I teach. So I am, thoroughly cemented in the gig economy, and I do a number of different jobs, number of different roles, but I really enjoy teaching. I teach at the university level, and on Monday I'll be starting a new course, which will be, a criminology course, Crime 101.
Congrats.
And it's been a little bit of a thing because of all the COVID safety. Everything's a bit different, and we're all sort of scrambling. And then I also teach and international relations, and then possibly into the future we're looking at setting up some early training courses on furniture removal in a whole different context. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the I'm sorry for cutting you off, but the way that you how you framed when you talked about conspiracy theories and how that was the premise of your thesis, and how conspiracy theories can help shape, people. It's just like religion, like I was reading something on Marx's views of religion, and he said that religion is basically just like opium for someone who's injured or hurt. It's going to satisfy you at the moment and give you an illusion so you can escape. And a lot of people use this religion to as an excuse for the atrocities in the world, early back into like parliamentary times, or like feudalism of kingship, king and queens thinking that peasants thinking that they were put there and placed by the will of God, and people scared to uprise because you think you're defying the will of God. It's just like nowadays, if Marx was around, he would definitely clump up conspiracy theory and religion together with the same views.
Well, it's yes and no. Like, I mean, the quote that everyone kind of draws from that segment of Marx is religion is the opiate of the masses. But
Mhm.
given what the Sackler family has done in the US in particular, I would hazard to say that opium is the opioid of the masses, which is a joke from Cody Johnson. So if you watch some more news, that's where I got that one from. But still, I mean, there is something to be said for the superstructure of religion as a mode of thinking that allows you to explain certain things that are beyond your rational grasp. And in that way, conspiracy theories do the same thing. So there is a parallel to be drawn there. But I think, like, if we look at QAnon,
Mhm.
there's like this two different currents crashing into each other to form a tidal wave of irrational thought, and that is the sort of evangelical Christian uh, base that, if you track it back to, all the way back to like the John Birch Society. So with my thesis in particular, conspiracy narratives and contemporary society, it begins by rehearsing Richard Hofstadter's famous argument about the paranoid style of thinking on the right wing, and then builds from there and draws in a lot of different people. But Joe McCarthy has a lot to answer for in regard to the dynamics of contemporary American politics. And to some extent, maybe I'm overinvested in American politics in particular, but just this week, looking at things like the issues around the $15 minimum wage,
Yeah.
and the parliamentarians' advice and things like that. And what frightens me, not so much that I think that, the Biden administration, although already they're dropping bombs on Syria, it's not so
And
much that
you
I'm
gotta give them credit too for the high class detention centers that they have. Apparently they have Wi-Fi down there as well.
Well, I mean, look, this is really, really complicated, and it's not as simple as saying, Joe. Like I follow Walter Matheson on TikTok, and he had a really good sort of quick 1 minute rundown of what that was, with the fact that Mitch McConnell during the Obama years was skillfully and strategically able to hold open a whole lot of judiciary seats that once Donald Trump came in, he was able to fill all those judiciary seats to some enormous number. Like, I think, including the 3 Supreme Court judges that get all the attention, but I think that it was something like 200 federal judges, or more than 200 federal judges. And so when you're looking at like where ICE can find recourse to continue to operate in the way that they were operating under Trump, then what we see is that there's sympathetic judiciaries who are going to continue the program regardless of what the Biden administration does. So
Mhm.
when you see a number like 100,000 people deported in the last 35 days or whatever it is, the last 30 days, sure, you could say Biden has deported 100,000 people, but that is too simplistic to capture any relevant information about what has actually happened. And it gets more complicated from there. So I think, the whole thing of like detention centers is pretty gross. Most Australians who became politically aware during the Howard years will be familiar with the abuse of human rights. I mean, we've got people who have been in detention for a very long time, decades now. In Christmas Island, in Manu, in Carlton, in a hotel, people have been locked up in a hotel for 8 years. Or so I'm not an expert on that, by the way. So my kind of the specificity of knowledge on that issue is not as well. It's not my field per se, but Natasha Despoja, the greatest prime minister we never had, kind of did a lot of good work in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, exposing what the Australian government was doing in regard to detention centres and just the enormous costs of this. And it is an issue that can excite a political constituency, and draw people out to vote. Now, when we talk about drawing people out to vote, in Australia, we have preferential voting, what has been kind of discussed in the US
Is that like
context.
rank? Is that like ranked choice
Ranked
voting?
choice
Okay.
voting, yeah. We call it preferential voting because of the British influence, and our use of the English language, where we put the U in color, or Labour, for example.
Yeah.
But it's the same idea, where your vote is never wasted. Whoever you vote for, even if you vote for no one, or you draw a phallic object on the ballot, or you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down the list, all those votes are still counted. And then on top of that, we also have we have compulsory voting,
Yeah.
which means once you turn 18 in our system, you're required to register to vote. And then every election you must vote. And because you're registered and because you're required to vote, we get 99, 98, 97% turnout at every single election. And I think that if that was the case in the US context, where you had the combination of compulsory voting and, if you want to call it ranked choice voting or preferential voting, you could see a more of a shift away from extremist politics, because there's not as much pressure to bring the vote out.
Yeah, it's like I'm sorry again to cut you off, but it's in the what you just explained, perfect. It's in the US, we don't have anything close to that. We have an electoral college, which is an archaic system, which was only implemented as a stopgap measure at the time, because the founding fathers had no sufficient way of trying to figure out the election. As we are in 2021, there's no measures put in place to change that. When you could hoard, or you could try to say like the middle of the country has more voting power than like the East Coast or the West Coast, and the whole ranked choice voting is something that we should look to. But just like you said, at 18 years old, instead of having it like you should register to vote, like here in the US, once you're 18 years old, you're automatically registered for the draft. That's something that automatically happens. So if we can have that for the draft, we could definitely have it for voting rolls and being on voting registrations.
Yeah, look, it's a different system, and we have the Westminster political system with a parliamentary setup. I mean, very simply, what that means is that if someone gets 40% of the vote, then they get 40% of the seats. And so it's not necessarily a winner takes all system. And I've been doing a deep read of this book by Barry Eichengreen, The Populist Temptation.
Okay.
And at the end of the chapter that I'm reading, which is the penultimate chapter, chapter 11, which is called Containment, and it's looking at the ways in which, a political system itself can be designed to prevent the rise of reactionary and populist politics. And it is very much driven around the US context because Barry Eichengreen is a US author. But he talks about the differences between the American system and the parliamentary system that you see in places like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and of course the UK. And so what with that is, yes, a winner takes all system can be very, very dangerous when you have a Donald Trump as the candidate who has this base of religious zealots who combine this conspiratorial thinking with their religiosity and create, golden calves of their hero kind of thing. Where that leads can be very, very dangerous. But then you think about the percentage likelihood of a Donald Trump winning an election. He lost the popular vote twice. So we can see that he, in a system that didn't have the electoral college, he would never have become president. And then in the, Georgia turned blue, Texas is purple. The demographics are definitely against that kind of minority rule moving forward. And so the winner takes all system does go some way towards preventing the kind of rise of extremists and in the case of Donald Trump, fascists. The issue is that it doesn't completely prevent it from happening, and we've just lived through that. And the issue with the whole parliamentarian thing that has advised that the $15 minimum wage is not a good idea, to however that's come down, obviously. The problem with that is that if you get to a point where the 2024 election is between, say, and this is impossible to predict, right? But if it was to be run tomorrow, Joe Biden isn't going to run. Kamala Harris is obviously going to be pretty high up on the list. She might not be the preferred nominee. I think it will be, I think the Democratic convention of 2023, 2024 will be a big field again. But it's likely that Kamala Harris will be up there, and then the question will be not do, but what she did do. And if the whole, and I was listening to Sam Cedar on the Majority Report yesterday talking about this is a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. $1.9 trillion. It's unfathomable how big that is. And the kind of ways and checks and balances that they've tried to put in it so that like state funding can't just be given to
this struggle for pensions or payroll. So basically, they don't want to fund the cops and the firefighters and city workers.
And also, they don't want to fund the electorate such that the state legislators can vote on tax cuts, for example, to their wealthy constituents and things like that. So, I mean, that's good. They want to invest in infrastructure, which is good, and all sorts of things like that. But the issue is you're going to have all this positive stuff, and at the end of it, all people are going to say, and this was Sam Cedar's point, is you spent $1.9 trillion, but you didn't raise the minimum wage, but you didn't do this. You didn't give us $2,000. You gave us $1,400 or whatever. And we spoke about that last time. And why would I care about that? I'm not going to get that money. I don't have to deal with the arcane health system of rugged capitalism. What, you didn't learn to be a doctor yourself to do your own surgery? Well, you're an idiot. What do you expect? Of course you're gonna have to pay. Of course you're gonna have to bankrupt yourself. What's more important than your life kind of attitude. I'm being facetious, of course, but
no. But you're hitting it right on the head, though. Regardless of if it's coming off as being facetious, as you said, you're hitting it right on the head, though. It's why a majority of Americans who were promised going into the Georgia election, they were promised a $2,000 check coming in the mail next week or the week after, but then they scale it down to $1,400. And then
And then
now you
they
have
spread it out
you
over
have
not
bad faith actors
2 weeks, but 3, 4, 5 weeks.
6 a month later, basically the middle of the summer. Then you have bad faith actors going like Jimmy Dore going on like Tucker Carlson and
Tucker
blaming
Carlson, yeah.
everything on Biden, which is not at all his fault. Trump handled this for 10 months. You Americans, we didn't get a UBI. I understand the frustrations with Biden, but as leftists, like we could critique him, but like let's critique him to a point that it's like it's not being able to be used as cannon fire or not to be able to be used against us.
Yeah, and so the issue that I have personally as an Australian, like, I think there was this whole thing January 21, 2017, right?
Mhm.
There was this thing called Not My President,
Yeah.
right? And that was a part of something called the Women's March. And everyone remembers the Women's March because of the kind of the hats that were a little bit silly but highly symbolic, and I think a really important touchstone for the Me Too movement. And for better or for worse, the Me Too movement is essential, and sometimes it's the morphology of ideas in my mind right now. So I'm seeing Jordan Peterson say, if you want to get good at something, get good at doing it badly first. And that's not bad advice. Jordan Peterson is trash, but that's not bad advice. And so the Me Too movement has had its stumbles and its falls, and it hasn't always supported people, especially if they don't fit the mold of the perfect victim, because it's still got to be filtered through a Hollywood lens. And so if you're not blonde, 5'8", and whatever, I had a joke there, but I've forgotten his name.
But it's like what we were talking about when you brought up the women's march and the whole "not my president" thing. That's a perfect example of something that could be co-opted by disingenuous actors and used as cannon fire to like come at the left. The women's march was used by like right-wing turfs and right-wing I'm gonna call out white women to co-opt the movement to take away from black women and black trans women that have been leading the charge of inequality for years in America. But if you call out the white liberal on this issue, they get offensive and they want to throw up arms and say, oh, you're no better than like Trump supporters. No, just like all these liberals that were complaining about Biden, complaining about Trump and his cages and the deportations. The same thing is happening on the Biden, and that's something that should be highlighted. Actually, right now on the Biden, we have Haitians, black Haitians are being deported to Haiti. We have black people being deported to Africa right now under the whole health and safety guidelines that it was the Trump administration that rolled it out after COVID, using some archaic 1973 health and safety law that was passed that you're able to like kick out whoever you out of the country when it comes to like health concerns.
As a part of quarantining.
As a part of quarantine. But then he used that as a platform to like, you know what? I'm gonna kick out as many Haitians, I'm gonna kick out as many Africans as I can, but people are not seeing it. They're focusing on the border when it should be focused on the whole spectrum and the policies that are in hand.
Yeah, and I mean, we can circle back around to that because that's important too. But the point of, and the joke I was, so Mix-a-Lot measurements from Baby Got Back is the joke I was trying to think of. But anyway, that's the point, is that, there is an element of like, you have to, the thin edge of the wedge does have to be acceptable to mainstream politics. And then once you get past that, you can start to expand it and look at all the other issues that come through it. And I, as a white man, it's not really my place to say, but as someone who has spent some time studying criminology, I can tell you a victim is a victim is a victim. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter when they said no. If they said no in the context of sexual assault, no means no. And that's the end of the story, period, full stop. So the Me Too movement has its flaws. and the desire for the perfect victim status, and the sort of the politics, the personal politics of certain figures, and I won't name names, but you know who they are, and
Mhm.
that kind of interfered with the broader message. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
because time's up, kind of thing, motherfuckers. Time's up.
Yeah.
It. I knew about Harvey Weinstein from 2006, 2007, right?
Mhm.
There's this great book, and I'm gonna have to look it up because I think it's called, but let me just double check. Okay, it's a book by Peter Briskin, and it's Bizkind, sorry, Peter Bizkind, and there's a documentary that goes with it. Anyway, it's called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, and it
I've heard of that.
yeah, and talks about the golden age of Hollywood and independent producers, and the art films of the 1970s, and all there's a whole manner of them.
Mhm.
But if you read carefully, if you read that book carefully, and you kind of look at the way that Harvey Weinstein is characterized in that book, it's obvious that he was a sleazebag,
Mhm.
right? And to what extent he was a sleazebag, the idea of the casting couch is as old as Hollywood itself.
Yep.
So you can kind of Biz doesn't come out and say that this was going on, but it's clear from what he's not saying that it was going on, right? So it's long, it's way too long, and it needs to be, but the momentum and the inertia of the kind of boys club of looking after each other has continued. So there was this thing, and I remember talking to a close friend of mine about this like idea of not my president. And it's like, well, yeah, but Australia is dependent on the US military, and any war that the US goes into, there will be Australian troops there.
Mhm.
So, if America was to start a war with New Zealand, then Australian troops would be in there fighting alongside the US, not alongside the New Zealanders,
Yeah.
even though in reality we have a lot more in common, so to speak,
With the
with New Zealand people.
Mhm.
Likewise, and the kind of trap that Australia is in is likewise we are economically dependent on China. So if America and China get into a conflict, which is the concept of the Thucydides trap to China and America, as one superpower declines and one superpower is ascending, and
Mhm.
they meet
At
at
the
the cross
apex.
point, they go to war, kind of thing. Um, then the very constitution of Australia, not the written constitution, but the actual shape of Australia and the dynamics within it, will necessarily have to adjust and change. And so it is very, very important to Australians who the United States president is. And we don't get a say in it. We don't get to vote in that. We don't get to influence the narrative except through means like this. And we've
Welcome
got
to
our
Puerto
own
Rico.
politics. Yeah.
Welcome to being Puerto Rican, Nick.
No,
Puerto Ricans on the island don't get to vote either.
no, nor do American Samoans,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And all the rest of the hidden empire pieces that are a part of it.
Yeah.
So,
And you just said it.
you know,
Empire Pieces is the perfect example. With just colonies that would just just chess pieces, pawns on a bigger playboard.
yeah.
I know like a lot of people are upset like with Biden and everything, but it's this summer actually, so this summer that we had with all the protests, it did put a little bit of fire to the establishment. It did scare them, and it did show them of what we can be if we all united as one. It was a little bit of taste of it. Anytime I talk to people about the Black Lives Matter protests, I love to say, like, imagine if that was like on a full scale, like a worker strike, like what happened in India.
Yeah, well, what's still happening in India,
Oh
let
yeah, oh,
alone
yeah,
what's
yeah, yeah.
happening in Kashmir. But I mean that the broader issue with the $15 minimum wage and the $2,000 checks is like I am not subject to either of those things, but they are vitally important to me personally because
But what's the minimum wage in Australia?
depends. So there's a few different rankings, but it's like I think if you're less than 21, 22, it's about $19 Australian. And then
Okay.
once you turn 22, 23, like we pay in the business I work for in the private sector, we pay above minimum wage. So it'd be about $23 an hour.
Okay.
And then it depends on your various what training and skills and attributes you have, what you're bringing, can influence that pretty dramatically. So,
But
but if you just
under
work at
21 is $19 an hour minimum wage.
yeah, I mean, don't quote me precisely. Let me look it up.
Yeah, no. I was seeing some breakdown, somebody who was arguing against minimum wage and Vosh. Yeah, Vosh was the one like critiquing him and showing that like also he tried to label Australia as a socialist country, which was pretty hilarious.
Well, we're a mixed economy, so
Yeah.
we have huge element. Like our health system is definitely socialized. We
Mhm.
have unemployment, which is called Job Seeker at the moment, but it used to be called New Start, and that's about $30-40 a day, which is below the poverty line. But it's anyone in Australia can go on that. We have free public schooling for primary and secondary. We need to move much further on
Well,
that. We
I'm
need to
sorry.
stop giving.
What do you mean? Like you're talking to Americans, so it's like, what do you mean by
Mhm.
primary and secondary? Like that's foreign language
Oh,
for me.
sorry, high school. So if you want to go to school, it's for
Uh-huh.
it's not free.
Hmm.
But there are very, very affordable. Like you still have to pay some fees. Obviously, if you're going on an excursion or things like that, you have to pay the excursion fee. You
Hmm.
have to buy a school uniform. You have to buy school books. So it's not free,
Hmm.
but there is a whole system. Like there's a federal Department of Education, then there's a state Department of Education in each of the states and territories. And
Okay.
if you're a teacher, you don't work for your school per se, you work for the state. So you are, in a sense, the teachers are, in a sense, civil servants who get paid directly from the state rather than
So it's
from
a
the
form of
school.
like state-owned capital, basically.
Well, yes and no. It's not, I don't know if you could, like, it's very complicated. Education as a public good is a very complicated issue.
Hmm.
But it's a mixed economy and it's
Okay.
much more egalitarian than the US's economy for sure.
Okay.
But that's important because the 4th of July kind of revolution, the American Revolution following the French Revolution and the implementation of the ideas of Montesquieu, a French thinker from, I believe, the 17th century, of the separation of powers between the judiciary, the executive, and the Congress. That's a French idea, not an
Mhm.
American idea. Some people don't know that, but that's a French idea.
Oh, because
And
Americans were the best. We come up with the best things. Just like the Constitution. The Constitution that wasn't made by Native Americans. What? That wasn't copied from Native Americans. No, American white men did that.
well, look, I mean, if you come in and you can do copy Control C Control V, and someone else can't do Control C Control V, then you have that little bit of an edge, and
Yeah.
it can help. So let me just do a currency converter. But look, the whole thing is it doesn't matter. Like if I tell you what the minimum wage in Australia is in US dollars,
Oh,
that
I think
tells
it's
you
comparable to fit. Like it's fit. Like I think when they were doing the the video that I saw, I think it was comparable to like $15 an hour, 15.62, I think, or 15.70 something an hour.
uh how do I what? How do I just convert this? I don't want to send it. How do I convert?
Don't send money. Don't send money.
No, I'll send money. Let's just do they've changed their website. All right, let's just use Google. Ironically, the
Mhm.
minimum wage in Australia, the federal minimum wage in Australia is $19.84. But I like that. That's George Orwell would get a
I was
kick
just about
as
to say,
well.
yeah, 1984, George Orwell.
So it would be 1529 per hour.
15,
But
20
then you
minutes.
have to calculate the cost of living to work out the ratio of what that means. So
Mhm.
it's like 1984 could be very good wage if rent is $200 a month.
Mhm.
But if rent is $2,000 a month, then 1984 is all of a sudden, its purchasing power is a tenth of what it was. So that's what you have to kind of understand it within the broader context of COLA, the cost
No,
of
no, no.
living.
I definitely get it, but my issue with the whole $15 minimum wage is the same like with that AOC and like Bernie and Ilhan. They like if there's certain political talking points or certain political topics that Republicans and Democrats, the liberal part of the Democrat and conservatives, that they would like literally attach on and highlight, but won't change. Republicans will never ever get rid of like when they would never make abortion like illegal, because if they did that, they wouldn't be able to cater to the evangelical base. The whole thing about the evangelicals, they want to cater to that one talking point, that one topic. The
Yeah,
same
so
thing
you
with
gotta have it. It's
exactly.
the thing with like okay, so it's the thing I was listening to Knowledge Fight again, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk about
No,
Knowledge
no, no,
Fight,
no, no,
but
no, never that, never
shout
that.
out to Dan and Jordan over at Knowledge Fight. Go and give them a listen; they're hilarious. But they were they put Alex in timeout every now and again when he's going off the rails in the present, and they go back and look at some of his older episodes.
Mhm,
And so they were looking at an episode from 2014 at the outbreak of the Ebola crisis. And, it was Alex's misrepresentation of the Ebola crisis. But what occurred to me listening to that was if Alex Jones represents the right-wing reactionaries, right? And obviously he's got issues because he's got his own expression and he's got his own kind of narcissism, but he's also got his own presence in the media that is not necessarily the same as like a Bill O'Reilly or a Rush Limbaugh or even a Ted Cruz, right? So there's the individual distinction, but he draws from the same sources as them, which maybe is Matt Drudge or something like that. Who knows? But he's wanting to do in that episode is he is wanting to amplify the threat as much as he possibly can.
mhm,
So, like, Ebola will kill you. If it won't kill you, it will kill your next of kin. Like, it
mhm,
is coming.
mhm,
But then at the same time, he needs a competent government to be taking care of that threat so that he's working in a dynamic where he's amplifying a threat that is already on the downslope.
mhm,
So the threat itself is diminishing, the risk of Ebola is constantly diminishing, and the competence of the governance around that issue is sufficient to take care of it. And he needs that
mhm,
so that he can edge the audience closer and closer and closer towards this fear of the apocalypse, knowing full well that there's going to be a stable environment moving forward into the future, so that he can do two things. One is openly and consequence free critique whatever move they make is the wrong move.
mhm,
And two, he can sell products because he knows the USPS is going to be able to deliver them because Ebola isn't actually a threat.
mhm,
So that's the dynamic we're dealing with. So amplify the threat, critique the response, and it doesn't enter for X, whatever X is. If it's Ebola, COVID, minimum wage, like, oh, you want to make it a $15 minimum wage, or what, you want to bankrupt mom and pop shops? It's like, no.
no,
First of
exactly.
all, what mom and pop shops still exist with Jeff Bezos as a monopolist within the system, or
With
Bill
the
Gates?
Walton family, Bill
You know,
Gates, and the list goes
yeah,
on and
but
on and on.
I mean, like Alex Jones rails against Bill Gates. He's putting microchips in the vaccine. Do you know how big a microchip is? It's like 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. Like, it's not going to fit in a
It's
vaccine.
it's it's
But
ridiculous
they're
because they talk
thinking of
about
nanotechnology, which is a whole. But whatever. That aside. That aside. The issue with
that's
Bill
about that.
Gates is that he has got this enormous amount of access to economic capital, which he is then using at his own discretion. That is the issue. Now, whether he's using it to buy up agriculture and farmland and becoming a monopolist in the food that you eat and the food supply, or whether he's using it to take over business, making Microsoft Office the most necessary tool to do any kind of business. Um, whichever way you look at that, that's an issue. You should not. It's anti-democratic at its very core, and the whole game is that Bezos needs to make Gates look good, right?
Hmm.
Bezos, Warren, whoever. They need Gates to be out there looking good. They need him to be reading 5 books a day. They need him to be doing blurbs for all these important, like, this is the most important book of our lifetime, blah, blah, blah. Everyone needs to read this. They need him to go on Oprah Winfrey and give away a whole lot of money or whatever it is, right? But they need him out front and center on the center stage, looking good, doing good, being this humanitarian figure that everyone can go, oh, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is giving away all their money, right? At the same time that him doing that allows Bezos to, interrupt union organizing in Alabama. Because at the one hand, you're saying, well, should we have billionaires? Yes, because, we need Bill Gates and he's a good billionaire. But sometimes, there's a bad apple and we have to just look out for those bad apples. And it's like, hang on a second. Hang on a second. What is the actual dynamic of this going on here? Because you have a huge concentration of wealth, which then is easily converted into power in the hands of a very few. And whether you have an electoral college or not, if you still have a billionaire class, whether it's 600 people or 6,000 people or 60,000 people or 600,000 people, that's still a minority in relation to the population in total of 340 million people.
Yep.
And so for every billionaire, you're putting like what, million people in poverty to have one billionaire. Kind of, I don't know what the numbers on that equation, but it's something like that in the ratio of like
No, it's
every
in the
one
U.S.
person.
This past year was I think a little bit over 500,000 people that clarified that's making more than $1 million in the United States. But that right there is just goes to show you the wealth and inequality. 500,000 people in a country that has like 350 million. Only
Mhm.
500,000 people made more than $1 million.
Yeah, and all of this opens the door to Trump. And the issue for me as an Australian is 5 years under the Trump administration, I was in constant fear of his narcissism getting in the way of international diplomacy.
Mhm.
Like, if Trump had continued, if the Trump administration had, as Mike Pompeo said, continued, and there was no transfer of power, um, then what would have happened to the World Health Organization? What would have happened to, the UN or NATO, right? All these imperfect, but at this stage, legacy and perhaps even necessary international institutions that govern to some extent. And, Michel Foucault says anything that can be corrupt always already is corrupt. So we
Mhm.
understand that UN is corruptible and therefore it has been corrupted. Um, and that's just an issue of volume is the enemy of any system. But you can see that in that dynamic, the UN existing, even on Rockefeller land, even with all the trappings of like elite class of people, like, the Georgia Guidestone type attitude, if you want to think of it that way, all of that. Um, oh, we've gone into widescreen, and my messy room is now much more visible.
Oh no, 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 no.
But even if that is the prevailing, it's better. It's better to have the UN than to have nothing,
Mhm.
right? And so the idea of a return of Trump or the rise of Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton or Mike Pompeo or Ted Cruz or even, you know, let's say Jeb Bush is still terrible. Um, even a Mitt Romney is stepped perhaps in the wrong direction. Maybe not. Maybe if Mitt Romney was to run again and win, uh, huge change in the Republican Party and a split off with a fascist new party, a populist party that is still clinging to Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump or Ivanka or whoever it is. And that's entirely feasible. So it's a game. It's all a game, but it's a game with very, very high stakes, and those high stakes are people's lives. And it's not just within the U.S. context that people's lives are at risk, as we saw this week in Syria.
No, I get that, and that's where it gets tricky, because if, like you said, if Trump would have stood in office, it's what would have happened to the WHO? What would have happened to like the CDC and stuff? And I get that, but it's like my partner, she linked me to a article by a native person that was talking about harm reduction and the lesser of two evils. And
Yeah, I saw that.
when you start having the conversation of harm reduction and lesser of two evils, that's when you fall down the pathway of losing certain principles that you hold close. When we start talking about the lesser of two evils, that's when we get concentration camps, or like deep separation camps, or
Yeah,
however
but
you want to
that's
label them.
when you put it in an absolute value
Mhm.
of harm reduction. I mean, look, we talk about Michael Brooks nearly every time we talk, and
Yeah.
he's talking about Bernie or bust, and it's like, but what if it's Biden? Well, then we vote for Biden because that's harm reduction. You can walk and chew gum, right?
Hmm.
In the choice between Biden and Trump, Biden is qualitatively better. There's just it's undeniable. There's no comparison
No,
between the two. The
absolutely.
Republican Party is qualitatively worse as a
Mhm.
whole, as an institution, with all the differences, different constituent parts, with your, what's her name in Maine, Susan Collins, and all the rest of them, right? The moderates and the Mitch McConnells and all that.
Mhm. Mhm.
As a group, they are qualitatively worse than the Democratic Party if your goal is to achieve an egalitarian society, right? And so in that regard, there is something to be said for harm reduction, as long as you are still fighting in the new ways that you can fight, in the new openings that you have to fight for the overall goal, the overall arc towards an egalitarian society.
Mhm.
And so, yes, if you just go, well, it's harm reduction and I'm going to brunch, see you in 4 years, then absolutely, you're going to get the kind of that kind of lack of accountability, and because it's such a big and complex system, the lack of accountability issue is so embedded and inherent within it anyway that it's really difficult. And the reality is the Progressive Caucus lost. Bernie dropped out of the race. That's unfortunate. And the
Mhm.
thing is, if you run in an election, you're much more likely to lose than you are to win. And that doesn't mean you give up.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean you stop fighting. And
No,
if we
definitely.
take just one issue of the Electoral College, there's a couple of different ways to end that. One is you pass a resolution through the House and the Senate with a two-thirds majority that says we will no longer use this arcane system. It is unrepresentative. It allows for a minority of the population to have a veto power over the majority of the population, which is steeped in a history of racism that is tied to the desire to continue the institution. And that is true. And that is the moral imperative here would be to do that. Absolutely. It is the right thing to do. And if every member of Congress in the US was a moral, upright person who wasn't corrupt, or if at least two-thirds of them were that way, then that could happen. But
Mhm.
there's other paths, like, my dad used to say there are many ways to skin a cat. It's kind of a gross saying, but there are many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And so when we look to what are the alternatives to that, right? Well, if you're in or if you're in Utah, or if you're in, Michigan, or if you're in Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, et cetera, um, there's something to be said for organizing to have your state, independently of the rest of the system, agree that their electoral college votes will just be the popular vote, right?
Mhm.
And that way, and then you get to a point where you have 48 states or potentially even 50 states excluding all the rest of the states in the hidden empire, but the 50 states that can actually vote, then they all represent the popular vote. Then the electoral college doesn't matter, right? It's purely a formality at that point. And I think actually we're closer to that
Yeah.
than what you might think, and that's why the 6th happened, because the 6th of January, the Capitol riot happened because the system is a lot closer to that kind of reform than perhaps we think it is.
No, it's a ticking time bomb, because it's the second way that you put it, with the states voting locally to have their vote count as the popular vote, that's the way that it will probably most likely get through, because relying on the Senate to have a 65 vote threshold, when we still have the filibuster in part, that's never going to happen. I'm an advocate of getting rid of the filibuster no matter what, because it's under Trump, Republicans back Trump on everything he wanted to pass, on every policy, on everything. Under Biden, the $15 minimum wage is getting held up by somebody from West Virginia. The college,
Potentially. I mean, the whole Joe Manchin thing is like, it's kind of a consequence thing where he doesn't necessarily have to face the consequences of his actions. He can say it, and
yeah,
then it
but
just is like the implication,
No, definitely. But the difference is, when Trump had a Republican, quote unquote, step out of line and not, go with his status quo, he would go on Twitter and shun him, and nobody wanted to get that bad shun from Trump on Twitter, because you needed his his support group. So if Biden can't go down to Joe Manchin and tell him, like, listen, you're going to vote on this, yes. If not, we will push hard for you to get you out of office. Joe Biden is not coming with that same energy. Kamala Harris is not coming with that same energy. Democrats in power, like Nancy Pelosi, they don't use their power, or they don't try to use their scare tactics like Republicans do. Like, when Republicans throw tantrums and Republicans want to get things done, they get it done. When Democrats want to get things done, we have to go across the aisle.
What
We
do
have to get
Republicans get
support.
done? What do
This
Republicans like? What is the governance of a Republican Party, though?
Well, they
Like,
got
what
through
have they
that.
built
They
other
got
than a
through that.
cult?
They got through that tax cut that
Oh, so a
that
tax
Trump
cut, but
did.
what does that build in terms of social cohesion?
No, not at all. It doesn't build anything towards social
So
cohesion.
what are
But
they building?
they're
Right?
building something from themselves for
Which
their
is what? Where does
which
it
is
end? If you run it out, if you run it out over the course of, say, 7 generations of iterations of Trump, like Trump, then Trump Jr., then Barron, then Trump Jr.'s son, then Barron's son, then whatever, over that period. And they all have the Trump ethos, and they all have the Trump what do you end up with?
We end up with Mad Max Fury Road. That's what we end up with.
Civil
Deregulation and all of that. Yeah, and controlling a certain group of money.
Once you start a war, everything is off the table. There's no predictions at that point from a sociological perspective, right? You don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know what the casualties are going to be. You don't know what the ultimate cost is going to be, and you certainly don't know who the quote unquote winner of that civil war is going to be.
No,
In such a
definitely.
way to accelerate a civil war is no way to govern. And so I'm not trying to necessarily play devil's advocate or defend Pelosi. Pelosi is almost indefensible, and certainly Biden is. But the bigger philosophical point would be to say, just because the Republicans do it doesn't mean that the Democrats should mirror them. If they start doing that and move away from the rule of law towards a realpolitik, which is who has the biggest gun wins, and the bigger the gun I can put to Kristen Sinema's head, the better, then where do we end up, right?
No,
You
but there's
end
a
up with
difference.
two dysfunctional parties that can't govern.
There's a difference of Republicans coming together for like a tax cut, or for like a immigration policy, or for like a kicking transgenders out of the military. It's a difference between them coming together and getting that done, and a difference between like Democrats not getting the Heroes Act passed when it comes to, like, right now trying to implement hazard pay for frontline workers. You know, that's not on the table. They are not talking about that. That was something they pushed before when the Republicans had control of the Senate. But now that it's flipped, that's not nothing that they're pushing. You know, the same thing with the $15 minimum wage. The $15 minimum wage, you guys could all come together and try to push that the same way they push these horrible tax cuts through, the same way they push these horrible deregulations through, the same way they push these horrible laws against trans people, trying to exclude trans people from the military. The same way Republicans could come together and get that done, it's the same way Democrats could come together and try to get the material life change for the bottom society of this society of America that they say they care about. They could throw on a Black Lives Matter dashiki and take a knee, but if you're not trying to actually try to defund the police or trying to relocate funds to a community like Camden, New Jersey did, what are you doing? You know?
I don't disagree with that. You know, I'm not necessarily going to say you're 100% right on that point, but
give a shout out to the chat real quick. I'm sorry, Fernando Munez. How you doing, brother? Salute.
I can't see the chat. I'm not. Is there?
Oh, you can't see it on your end on the live stream. Yeah,
I can see it now. Yeah, look, I mean, the performative action of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi in the
I'm adding Alex to the stream. There he is. Alex, if you could just mute the YouTube, if you could just mute the YouTube video.
Trying to see how I do that
on the YouTube end.
I'm adding Alex to the stream. I got my boy. Alex, if you could just mute the YouTube, if you could just mute the YouTube video. I'm trying to see
wherever's YouTube. Yeah, just mute the YouTube link. Hold on.
It's good for the three of us to finally be together.
I know. Hey, Alex, you got to unmute yourself, brother. Click the yeah, there you go.
Okay, is it working now?
Yeah. Copy. What's good, comrade?
What up, guys? What up, Nick? Nice to meet you, Nick. I know.
Nice to meet you, Alex.
Mute yourself, brother. Click
Yo, bro, can you mute you have the YouTube link still open in your web browser?
Yeah. Copy. What's good?
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, I have my boy Fernando.
Yeah.
He's into politics too. So I wanted to get him. He lives in he's from Connecticut.
Okay.
But he lives in North Carolina. So it's good different perspectives. And he's a leftist too.
Okay. Well, Fernando, if you want to join, come in. But it's great to have all three of us finally in a stream together discussing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to center myself.
Here we go. It's all backwards.
Yeah. So I'm here, right? You guys see me and all that?
Yeah, we see you here, brother.
Okay. I just told my boy to come through too. His name is Fernando Munez. Did he pop up?
Yeah, he popped up. He's in the chat. He says salute, just checking in. Yeah, he's in the chat. I see him.
I was wondering if he could join. Is there a way he could join?
Yeah, he just has to click on the link.
There's a link there.
I'll put the link again in the chat.
Okay. His name is Steve. His name is Steve.
Okay.
But, his first name is Fernando. Kind of like I use my middle name Alex. So Steve, join us. Nice to meet you, Mick. Finally, this is really cool. I remember when I had my father on here, you were commenting a lot, and we didn't see any of your comments because sometimes Instagram is like that. And so I was like, damn, I wish I could see his comments because I would have made the conversation way more interesting. It was very interesting, but it
was a very good conversation regardless.
And I was like, damn, I want to see his comments. And then I think we had to get out of it and come back in order to see your comments. And we just caught the very last of them, and I was like, damn.
Bill Gates was trying to shut us down. That's what it was. Too many.
That was IG. That's Zuckerberg trying to shut you down.
Oh yeah, that's what that was.
We were just talking about the performativity of Congress in response to Black Lives Matter and taking a knee and wearing the decorative scarves and all that, and 100% that isn't enough, right? And this is Comrades Corner. We know that it's a material situation and that you need to make material adjustments in order to actually change the underlying tensions that exist in American politics that then affect the rest of the world, right? Because, you know, Michael Moore says we have 3 viruses to fight. We have the COVID virus, we have the Trump virus, and we have the virus of that which gave us Trump, right? Which is maybe good, maybe bad as a model, but let's just use it to say that the leader of Australia, Scott Morrison, doesn't necessarily have the same cultural and identity power as a leader that Trump has, but certainly has benefited greatly from the Trump administration in terms of building and sustaining a angry right-wing coalition that is concerned primarily with identity politics and cultural issues rather than sustainable issues around, you know,
in
infrastructure.
Australia, do you have progressive candidates or progressive people that are in a position to get a position of power where they can make?
Not really.
No?
We don't really have, like, we had a communist party years ago, like in the 60s and 70s. There was an actual communist party that ran elections and stuff, but essentially we have a 2-party system between a center left and a center right, and really
like
it's
us.
more
Well, we're like
Yeah,
center,
it's very
we're like
similar.
right and then center right.
Yeah, or extreme right and then center
Yeah.
right. You're muted.
Extreme
You're
right
muted,
and-
Anthony.
Right and extreme right.
That's exactly what it is.
It's
Yeah.
so sad. I just saw the film Judas and the Black Messiah.
Tell me your thoughts. Tell me
Oh
your
my God. That's why I'm like late, because I was watching it. I'm like, it's getting good. I have to finish it. And oh my God, it's such a good film. I like it got me
Is
like,
it on like streaming? Is it on Netflix or something? Or
it's on
Showtime?
HBO Max.
HBO Max.
I don't have that here. We don't have that here.
Damn.
I'd have to do some tricky VPN work, and I don't know if I'm technically up to that. But I'll find a way to get it.
I'll let you call my VPN and my HBO Max log it if you need.
Yeah, that would be
Well,
awesome.
listen, like that was never said, or nor was it ever heard. So
I know nothing.
we do not share streaming accounts here. We do not bring down tech giants with that kind of bang.
Not at all. But the parallel of the parallel of that movie, I like that movie, but it didn't really touch on his politics as much as I would like. You know, it did focus on, you know, his involvement and well, I shouldn't say his involvement. It did show like what was his ideas when it comes to socialism, like his views on socialism. I'm glad it didn't have like I told you, Dick, it didn't say like, oh, socialism means government does everything and no iPhones. Like it didn't have that message in the movie at all. It didn't have like any anti-socialist propaganda in the movie, and that was my big point of it.
That was cool. They actually showed in the beginning like a quote where he said he was talking about socialism, like he's gonna like do this through socialism like, at the very beginning, and I was like, that was really cool. There's only so much they could show in a film, but I think like the whole main point of it was to show how the FBI took down Fred Hampton.
Definitely.
And I think that was like the main point of it. And I think the actors did amazing. And I hope a lot of people see it, because it'll, you know, show people that, because of what he said in the beginning about socialism, like it'll make their curiosity like spark, and maybe they'll check into socialism more and normalize it more in this capitalistic society that we live in. I've you know become a lot more socialist as just starting with this podcast. Like I'm still learning a lot.
Well, we all are. Like we'll always be learning, ancora imparo, so to speak, which is probably giving away too much information about my personal life and doxing myself. Ancora imparo, lifelong learning. But I mean, can we play clips? Is there any way? Like, can we play the?
I could try to play. I don't think. Not wait. Hold on. Let me see.
Can we try it, and if it's a magnificent fail, just move on and work on clips later? I'd love to see the trailer. That's all.
Yeah. There we go. All right. So I'm sharing my screen. You guys can see it. Boom.
Yeah.
Technology. All right. Let me go to YouTube.
No, you're already in YouTube. Just put in Judah and the Blackberry.
Cool.
Yeah,
This is like my first ever like, stream, which is like pretty cool.
I was typing in YouTube in the YouTube search bar. Wow, special guy I am. Let me know if you guys can hear it.
Do we have sound?
Do you hear it? Let me see.
Okay.
I can hear a cat. Oh, there we go. I can hear it now.
All right, this is a commercial.
All right, man. We gotta get a premium account for you because you can't be advertising whatever insurance companies on Comrades Corner.
I'm gonna share something with you. Like the masses, I was in awe when I first laid eyes on all the things you are. I heard that speech. I knew we'd make noise. I just thought it'd be in the streets.
The Black Panthers are the single greatest threat to our national security. Our counterintelligence program must prevent the rise of a Black Messiah.
You're looking at 18 months for the stolen car, 5 years for impersonating a federal officer, or you can go home. What do you want? Get close to Hampton.
The Black Panthers are forming a rainbow coalition of oppressed brothers and sisters of every color.
Neutralize him by any means necessary.
America's on fire right now. And until that fire is extinguished, nothing else mean a damn thing. Imagine what we could accomplish together. We can heal this whole city.
You ain't tell me it was gonna be like this. These ain't no terrorists.
We got a rat, man.
So you guys know about this?
No one knows your identity.
Are you sure?
We educate, we nurture, we feed, and we lobby. Perhaps we're here for more than just war with these bodies. We scream, and we shout, and we live by this anthem. But it's power to the people who really worth their ransom.
When I dedicated my life to the people, I dedicated my life.
You get to go up there and talk about dying a revolutionary death because you don't have another person growing inside your body.
Anywhere there's people, it's power.
That's a powerful movie.
Yeah. It really was. Like, I was just.
Oh, is Nick there? Hold on. You hear Nick? Oh.
Hey, sorry.
No, what happened?
No, I was trying to make a note in the private chat because I noticed some stuff in the mise en scène of that trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to make a note of it, and I accidentally hit login, and it took me out of the stream. So I won't play around with the chat. But there was just like war is politics was on the blackboard, and that is there's the famous sort of aphorism by von Clausewitz, which is war is the continuation of politics by other means. And then Foucault is somebody who I kind of have read a lot of, and he inverted that and then went back, right? So he said war is initially politics is the extension of war by other means, which is the inversion, and then by the end of his career, war is politics is an extension of politics by other means. So that's an important little symbolic thing that
in the film, there's a part where Fred Hampton is teaching his people, and he says, "War is politics. Politics is war." And so that is like exactly what you're talking about. So that's interesting you say that.
What's the timeline? Was that around, like in the film, was that around 1968?
That was at the time
young.
right before the assassination of Martin Luther King and to like 70, 71. Like Fred Hampton when he passed, like he was 21 years old. He started his activism at 16, 17, and where they started off with him in the movie, he was 18 years old, 18, 19 years old. So to have that much of an impact at such a short and very young age is impressive. I'm gonna play another clip since we found out this thing that we can do. Yeah, buddy. So I'm just when he talked about there it is. I'm gonna play this clip from Fred. And these bloody
actually, do you prefer Anthony or Hector? Because I've noticed you go by Hector in these streams.
I would say Hector. Anthony is like you guys. I would consider you guys my close friends, not my comrades. So we could say Anthony or whatever, but Hector just because that's professional.
All right, I'll say Hector moving forward when we're on the stream.
Nah, that's cool.
But if you want to get, I learned this the other day. If you want to say that Fred Hampton clip, right? So you don't want the ads. You don't want to play the ads. What you can do is copy the link in the address bar, and then just add a period at the end of it, and that will tell YouTube not to display the ad.
Thanks for Nick's dropping gems. Fernando, what's up, Fernando? Where'd Alex go?
Hey guys, how's it going?
What's good, brother? How you doing,
nice to meet you,
I'm doing well.
Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Of course, man. This is like I said, this is an open panel discussion. We're open for anybody. I know majority is just like leftists and progressives here. But hey, we open the panel to anybody who wants to come on. Where in North Carolina you live?
I live in Charlotte.
Okay. My sister, she lives South Carolina, Indian Hill, literally like 20 minutes away from Charlotte.
Yeah, not far at all.
Yeah, awesome. Well, nice to have you on. I'm not sure what happened to Alex. Let me put the link back in the chat for him.
He came, he dropped Judah and the Black Messiah, and then he left.
Yeah, he came, he saw, he conquered. That's what he did.
So, all right, let's try this thing. Go back to the clip and see if I'm right on this.
Well, it's the commercial pass. So I have YouTube Red. It's just I don't have it on this account. I have to switch it over to this account. So that's no problem.
Well, we'll just see for the future. Try the period at the end of it and see if it. Because we don't want to play ads on a leftist show, guys.
Absolutely not.
Is this the breakfast program?
He clicked on something. Yeah. This was this was when they were trying to organize like more than like when it came to like banks for like credit unions and stuff. So this was like him breaking down what should be the priority, either credit unions, education, or healthcare. I'm gonna play this real quick.
Basically knowing my ideology, basically, and yours, you can support some of our programs. Is that what you're saying? Why not? And believe in programs like the Social Children Program and free health clinics. Right on, brother? We believe they're good points. As a focal point to organize them for others. Peace. There's no educational program here? That's come out of social license. You set that up. We can't put everything on one paper. What about this bank? Credit union? Credit union. Credit union, my brother. Are you hip to credit unions? It is a bank. You go and borrow money? Yeah, it's a bank. It's a bank. Owned by the people. Run for the people. And by the people. What will money be given out to people for? Well, the people would decide that. You want to buy, whatever, the people in the community decide. You need some living room furniture, maybe? You need a car, maybe? See, the thing is with me, you dig, I need to know some more about it. I wish you had some more literature about the educational thing here. Because, you dig, as far as we're concerned, in the struggle, when we look at struggle, is that this depends on the educational thing, you dig. Because this depends on the education. Well, the whole thing. No, but in the end, this does. You can form this with no education. No, not the way we talking about forming it. Right. We're talking about forming it, right. You know, it's not on the paper. We didn't write it on the paper. Formal right to education. No. Let me give you an example. Jomo Kenyatta formed the excellent revolution with no education. And then at the end thing, Jomo told the motherfucker, I said, well, you know, you can educate, hate the enemy, but I'm your brother. I'll help you lead the revolution. Now I'm more pressure. Another example, Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated everything white. Man, you couldn't put this white paper in front of Papa Doc's face. But he moved all the white people out and he took over and be the president. He did, causing no education. And the people that's been educated, they just said that we don't hate the motherfucker white people, we hate the oppressor, whether he be white, black, brown, or yellow. So we got to know the educational program to find out what is going to be in the future. A lot of people, what Jomo Kenyatta is called not a never-revolutionary, but an ex-revolutionary. So it's Papa Doc. They brought on a successful revolution. That thing in the Mama's was a bitch. Bantu freedom fighters, all that kind of action. What we're saying is the end. But you don't judge Castro now. You can't do it. Nobody in this room could judge whether Castro's going to be a revolutionary or not. You know what I mean? We're talking about things, you know what I mean, with China, the People's Republic, and even at the stage they're in now, talking about even going on further into a communistic state. That's what we're talking about. Those are revolutionary. So we got to understand here the educational program that you have to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines, where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, the people take this local foundation and start stealing money because they won't be really educated to why it's the people's thing anyway. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa now, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get caught up in an emotionalist mood. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we have Negro imperialists.
That right there is a great clip.
I agree.
Who was it that I can't remember who it was, but someone described
There he is.
Barack Obama presidency as being neoliberalism in blackface.
I don't know who it was, but yeah.
I mean, that's what Fred Hampton is talking about. Like, if we're not educated, then the representation will be, you know, enough of an illusion for us to buy into it.
Yeah, this is reading this book right here on Che Guevara. I was actually watching the movie with Benicio del Toro. It's a really good movie.
Can you show that book again?
It's Socialism and the Man in Cuba. So it has to do with Fidel and Che.
Oh,
and
wow.
I saw the Benicio del Toro movie with about Che Guevara.
Oh,
Really
I was just
fun.
watching that like 2 months ago.
Yeah, good movie, and he explains it that education is the key. You know, masses of people that are uneducated are masses of people that could be persuaded and just switched and could be controlled like that. Look what's going on here in the United States. We have people running around not wanting to wear a mask because they don't believe in science. Same thing with climate change. It's education is key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power, and that's how you get into the power structure. Through knowledge. You gotta let the people know the knowledge so they can.
This is a very
gunpowder
approach, right? The power knowledge was the name of actually one of Foucault's books, but the power dynamics within a society are designed to include knowledge. And you know, something I was thinking about last night is in any system you want to be able to draw more information out than you put in, right? Especially a political system. So you know, we what precipitated this is like we were talking about Me Too, Alex and Fernando before you guys joined, and
yeah,
you guys met my friend Fernando, by the way. I know I got kicked out.
Yeah, no. Fernando's been here before you, bro. You just like, don't worry about
cool.
it. MySpace, don't worry about it. So yeah, like you said, we was talking about like that with the whole Me Too movement, and I was trying to highlight how you can have bad faith actors trying to co-opt and trying to take over a movement to try to shape it into something that it's really not.
Right. I feel like there's
education is key in that moment, right?
Yeah.
To prevent that from happening.
Yeah,
And that's exactly what happened with Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. The bad faith actors came in and the oppressors came in, and together those two things just squeezed it and killed it.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised this movie was allowed to be made, because they really show that about the FBI. And, you know, Hollywood is very neoliberal. And
do you really think that this one movie, Alex, is enough to overcome like 13 seasons of like Criminal Minds and Law and Order and all the rest? Like, dude,
right? And they got the CIA
X-Files. Come on, man. People love the FBI. Mulder and Scully work for the FBI.
I know. And they have this new CIA show with the guy from The Office.
Oh my God! You talking about Jack Ryan? Basically, the show that the CIA wrote to try to, like, you know, talk about Iran and talk about Venezuela.
Oh, man, if you guys are into this, you got to check out Tom Secker over in the grassy knolls of Yorkshire, England, and he has done some amazing work on CIA and Hollywood over the course of like 6 or 7 years now. But he's just got a treasure trove of FOIA documents and actually taking the time to go through them and chart exactly how the CIA, through their entertainment liaison office, has controlled Hollywood for the past 35, 40 years. And
so frustrating.
You know,
yeah. You know what's crazy? Like, I was on this show for MTV called True Life over the summer, and it was going really well. And the person, this like producer person that I got in contact with, we became like really close, not close, but like we were like talking every day. And I'm for Bernie Sanders, and she was for Elizabeth Warren. And when it came to the point where Bernie Sanders conceded and Joe Biden was going to be the candidate, she was all for Joe Biden. And I would always post like Bernie. I would still post Bernie Sanders stuff. I'm like, I'm not going for Biden and fuck Trump. I'm sticking with Bernie. I'm writing him in. And then she hit me up and she was like, yo, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you, you know, like, why are you putting this Bernie? I'm not thrilled about Biden either, but, you know, who else? And I'm just like, you know, I'm not going to vote for someone that I don't agree with. I'm not going to vote for Biden. You know, he was racist. If you look at old videos of him, he's saying the N-word and shit. Like, you know, like, not nigga.
Right, but at the same time, he hasn't stayed that way, Alex. Like, he has shifted over the course of 40 years in politics.
Yeah.
Like, he has always moved to kind of remain in the center of the party. And as the party has become more woke, Biden has become more woke. But the Anita Hill shit is pretty hard to stomach. You know, looking back on that, it's pretty hard to stomach. And that brings us back to the whole Me Too thing, you know. And right now, the biggest thing in Australian politics, there are two things. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Our pass a law so that Zuckerberg and Dorsey and whoever owns Google pay Rupert Murdoch a licensing fee to post news on Facebook and Google, rather than actually invest. In fact, maybe I can send you a link.
They're trying to do that right in the States as well. They're trying to do that in the States as well.
They've been somewhat successful in doing it, so much so that that Zuckerberg prevented all news, including some really important, like, you know, family violence stuff. Hotline numbers.
Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, tried to he's trying to bring to vote a law for it to pass for Facebook and like so Facebook could promote and pay like news sites or whatever that promote on Facebook, and so Facebook has nothing to do with like saying basically fact checking anybody who's running for politics in Florida.
Oh yeah, but no, hang on. Ben Shapiro is helping Facebook do fact checking. So like the Daily Wire is helping them. I dropped a link that talks about it, but the other biggest issue, so the whole News Corp bargaining code is one big issue. We can look at that. But the other big issue is the fact that a woman was raped in federal parliament by someone who worked for the Morrison government, the Liberal government. And now four women in total, 3 other women have come forward alleging sexual assault, and the government is just like, so. And then after the backlash to that, so he came out and said, well, my wife spoke to me about it and said, well, what if it was your daughter who was raped? And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, if it was my daughter, that would be a pretty bad thing, you know, kind of. And it's all bullshit. It's like, fuck Scott Morrison. Like, if you need it to be in that context for you to understand it in any, and they, sorry, I'm going to lose my shit, but they hired a consultant. They hired a consultant, right? Do you want to know what this consultant's role was?
What?
Empathy advisor.
Oh, that's like over here in the U.S. They had a near attendant with this ethics committee or something where some bullshit, and it was like, yo, near attendant, you're the most corrupt pilot. You are the poster girl for corruption.
For Clintonian corruption.
She was more of like a Twitter troll than Trump was, and that's like because Trump loved Twitter, especially.
Do you think she's gonna get voted in? Let me ask you guys that. I know.
Yeah. She's going to get voted in. It's just Republicans are just going to like take their gloves off and just go to town on her during these confirmation
I don't know. Maybe this is where Joe Manchin comes back.
That's what I'm saying. Joe Manchin is saying he's not going to vote for her, and then Bernie, he's like, I don't know. We don't know where he's going to go. If he's going to vote for her, and she was his biggest enemy, like more so than anyone else.
But yeah, Hector, if you want to play I'm
gonna play it right now. Fernando, do you have anything to add on? I don't want you to just feel like you're sitting on the sidelines.
Well, yeah, I'll make a comment on the last thing here. I don't think they're gonna go for near Tandon, especially Bernie, especially based on his history and what he said. He acknowledged a lot of the issues there, so I don't think he's gonna end up voting for her. I know it seems he's on the fence, but I don't think he will.
Definitely.
I fucking hope, because I can't stand near attendant.
No, she's terrible. And like David Dayen at the American Prospect, among others, has and I'm getting this from Sam Seed. I'll just be blunt with my Control-C, Control-V here. But David Dayen has sort of postulated or suggested that there are some other more progressive candidates that could take Neera Tandon's spot if she doesn't get in. So there's a lot at stake here. So the idea would be hopefully Bernie and Joe Manchin and others with the Republicans. And there's a bipartisan situation. Alex,
he getting photo.
What's your cat's name? What's your cat's name? That's the rule of Zoom. Is if your cat comes in.
Yeah, if your cat or dog comes in, you have to automatically give them an introduction. Alex.
I guess you can stay here, but he's a savage. This one. He's like untamed.
Just looking for his cameo.
That's all. He's trying to get his 2 seconds of
fame.
fame.
He made it on that show I was in. See, look at this guy.
All right, now one thing before, just to translate a little bit for the American audience. One thing, when you hear the term the liberal government, I want you to think Republican. Liberal government means Republican.
But it's just like the liberals in the U.S. are conservative. Copy, I got you. Let me know if you guys hear this video. Do you guys hear the audio from the video?
I don't hear it.
Not yet.
Yeah, I don't hear it.
No? Okay. Hold on.
Is suffering.
There we go.
I hear it now.
With tech platforms. As firm believers in the free market, we can't let the market get away with this, so we've come up with a way to tilt it back in favor of this giant fucking tumor. Introducing the News Corp bargaining code. Because we can all agree that Facebook is the problem. It's become too powerful, pays fuck all taxes, promotes fake news, and then it tried to bully us. Your government. We can't let such power fall into the hands of this billionaire. That power needs to stay in the hands of this billionaire who's become too powerful, pays fuck all taxes, promotes fake news, and bullies your government. News Corp bargaining code. The News Corp bargaining code recognizes that traditional media is struggling. As advertisers shift to Facebook and Google, thousands of journalism jobs have vanished, many of them in regional areas. Sure, we could fix this by taxing tech giants and investing the revenue in quality journalism, but then we'd have to close tax loopholes, and we can't do that to our friends. Plus, it means we'd end up with quality journalism, and fucked if we want more of that. So instead, we come up to launch and make Facebook and Google prop up mega news corporations by making them pay for news content linked to their platforms. Will that help our ailing media? The code doesn't ensure the revenue will go to journos instead of shareholders, and we don't really give a shit. The only reason we're doing this is to keep up the propaganda department in business. News Corp Bargaining Code. The best part of the code is that instead of trying to fix what people don't like about big tech, it encourages traditional media to get in on the action. That's why rather than introducing stronger privacy laws to prevent your data being mined by these guys, the code lets these guys mine some of that data too. It also gives them access to changes to the algorithm, which means our friends will have inside knowledge that lets them optimize their content for clicks and ad revenue. And we all know that's what the world needs. More corporate clickbait bullshit. In short, the code aligns the interests of big media and big tech, thereby ensuring that they have a shared interest in destroying human civilization for profit. News Corp Bargaining Code.
Of course, not all media will benefit from the code. Smaller publishers and independent journalists and YouTubers won't have access to these perks, making it harder for them to compete and survive.
Which is great for us here at the Australian government, seeing as many of those smaller publishers, independent journalists and YouTubers just so happen to have become very good at exposing the shit fuckery of
the Liberal government.
News Corp Bargaining Code. So as you can see, it's a win-win. Big media gets propped up, big tech awards being broken up, and big cunts get re-elected because we'll have silenced our critics. The loser, as always, is you. Authorised by
the Liberal government.
All right, that was hilarious.
Yeah, that definitely gave me a good laugh.
Oh, I mean, it hits hard, but it hits hard because it's true. Like Rupert Murdoch, if you look at the countries where he has a foothold or a stronghold in terms of the media, you know, Fox News, what has Fox News done to the Democratic base of America, right? It's rotted their brains and led to OAN and Newsmax. You look at Britain, like the Daily Mirror, the Telegraph, things like that. What happened? Brexit is totally against their own interests and against the constitution of their democracy. And Australia, Rupert Murdoch owns 70% of the Australian media nationwide. In some states, it's 100% of the media, right? So, you know, you got folks like Andrew Bolt, etc., trying to start up this, you know, Sky News Australia, which is just a Fox News 2.0, but for an Australian audience, pushing, you know, anti-climate change, anti-mask. You know, it's like instead of one Tucker Carlson, we got 15 Tucker Carlsons that are all connected to Rupert Murdoch. That's what Rupert Murdoch does. He produces, you know, Rush Limbaugh's and Tucker Carlson's. And it's just destructive to democracy. He's been able to, you know, play Scott Morrison in such a way that he's pushed through this code, which is going to really just hurt ordinary Australian people and prop up these propaganda machines, as the video said.
Do you watch Secular Talk with Kyle Kalinske at all, Nick?
I see bits and pieces. Look, to be honest, I probably watch too much media as it is, with like between the Majority Report, Left Reckoning, some Michael Brooks show clips and stuff like that. It takes up half my day, and then I got to teach, and then I got to research and cook dinner and do dishes. So I don't. Kalinske isn't really in my rotation, but I have seen some of his work.
I highly recommend him because he's my favorite out of everybody. Kyle Kalinske he's the one that really taught me the majority of my idealism. And he's got this new podcast with Crystal Ball from Rising.
Yeah, Rising with Crystal Ball and Agar or Sakara or whatever it is.
I would say like Secular Talk is a good, if you're trying to like blue pill or red pill anybody, Secular Talk is a good way to introduce people to the left. And then you could go to Michael Brooks, and then, you know, because you have to have a somewhat of an understanding of certain things in order to fully get the conversations with other leftists, Michael Brooks and Kyle Kalinske, not too much. But like if you listen to Chapo Trap House, if you listen to like other leftist platforms, like you have to have somewhat of a basis of understanding of like the political conversation to like get any of
I don't know. The thing with the left, right? The left, it's heterogeneous, right? There is no left. There is a right. The right is homogenous. And so the right is able to unify in terms of their narratives because they are basically all on the same page every time. There's no real factions within. Maybe now because Trump has kind of exposed the golden calf of Trump at CPAC, for Christ's sake. But within that concept, they are a minority, and the smaller a group is, the more likely that group is able to achieve homogeneity. But the left is a much bigger group, and so there are multiple factions within the left, and so I don't like labeling things left and right in that way. I mean, the right, obviously, the extreme right, fascism needs to be labeled and called out. But the left spectrum is everything from like here. Wait, where am I on the screen? How do I do this? Here's the right, and then the left is everything else, right? Everything up to like here, and then the right is past that. So it's a huge spectrum, and Kalinske is one part of it. Crystal Ball is one part of it, and obviously they both work with Michael. I'm not necessarily against them, but I think that Rising is problematic, and I think that the sort of the way that people have broken down the issues with Rising are worth taking into consideration. You should never have like we're just going to go for balanced representation and hear both sides if one side is representing fascism. Right, you can't find middle ground. Like Michael Moore was talking to Rick Perlman, and they're saying like meeting in the middle of the road is dumb if the middle of the road means you're going to get hit by a truck. And I think when you're trying to meet a fascist in the middle of the road, you're always going to get hit by a truck. So that's like nothing against Crystal. I don't know her personally. I know like some of the stuff I've heard her break down and discuss is really good. But I just think the concept of Rising, the morning show at least on that network, is pretty dubious.
Really?
I'm not sure about it
because it's a conversation of making concessions, and like we was talking about before, of like losing your principles of what it is of what you're fighting for. You got Sager who represents what he represents, and just like Nick said, you don't want to meet somebody like that in the middle of the road, because then that's where you get like the concentration camps. Under the like Obama administration, we got DACA. Absolutely, we got DACA. That's something that should be recognized. But one of the concessions of DACA was having the detention centers at the border. That was one. You can't say that, oh, we got DACA, but we're going to have detention centers at the border for people crossing illegally. It's, understand? It's like, and that leads to where we are at right now. Just making that one concession. So one little something that is not supposedly evil leads and can lead cookie crumbs to where we are at right now.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate though. Like Fred Hampton, he went to what's called the Hillbilly Harlem, and it was a bunch of like conservative.
Oh no, the Confederates,
Confederates, and he was able to get them on board with the Black Panther Party
by highlighting the fact that they're all victims of the capitalistic system. So when you have Sager, still promoting the what the structure of conservatism is when it comes to the same policies, those are the policies that Fred Hampton was against. None of those.
And the inverse of that, Alex, is Jimmy Dore going on Tucker Carlson, right, and saying, "Oh, the Democrats do nothing. Why don't we have $2,000 checks already?" Right, and completely ignoring all the grandstanding and sandbagging that the Republicans have been able to push through over decades, right? This problem isn't new. Like, do you think when Mitch McConnell was, doing his compromise on DACA with Obama and the Obama administration. Like, do you think in his head he was like, oh, well, these detention centers will be... No, he saw those detention centers as concentration camps from the very first minute. And he knew, like, all right, if we're going to have DACA, I want to poison it with this, like, deadly cancer that will be able to be immediately exploited by our guy as soon as he comes in, which is what happened, right? And then it's like closing a concentration camp is almost impossible. How long has Guantanamo Bay been open? It's still fucking open, right? It's very, very difficult once it's there to shut it down, right? Despite entropy, despite the second law of thermodynamics. It's just mind-boggling. And so this is the thing.
Nick, what do you think we could do to unite the right and the left and the center?
I think, look, when you say unite the right, that sends chills down my spine and you know, hits me in the very bone marrow with flashbacks to Charlotte in 2017.
Yeah, but like half of America is right wing, you know, like half of it.
What you have to do, Alex, is you have to lift the floor, right? Because it's an economy of precarity, which means that it doesn't matter how wealthy you are now. If you don't have security for the next, if you can't plan the next 10 years, right? Now, we're not talking about the 1% or even the 10%. We're talking about the bottom 5th percentile, the next bottom 5th percentile, and the middle percentile, and maybe the 4th, like the second top percentile, right? And when you got billionaires like we were talking about earlier in the system, they skew it so dramatically, right? You know, if I'm in a if the four of us are in a lift with Jeff Bezos, then the average wealth of the people in that lift is something like $500 million or $10 billion or something. And the reality is none of us really have any money in that statement, right? So, you know, it's a real problem. So what you need to do is you need to create what Bismarck did, basically, to unite Germany. You need to create a really strong safety net. You basically need a level of socialism at the base so that people are not hungry, people are not bankrupt for, you know, getting a hip replacement, or if they survive the medical costs of getting a hip replacement, the Sackler family is selling them drugs and causing a lifelong addiction to extract rents through an opium addiction. You know, like, all of that has to go. All of that has to be removed from the system before we can even start to approach a conversation between left and right ideologues.
Like, imagine this past summer, Alex, when you had when COVID lockdowns first went into effect and you had all these protests, like basically Trump supporters fighting against the lockdowns. You think they really would have been fighting against the lockdowns if they had like a UBI monthly, if they didn't have to pay rent, if their like financial means was met? They would be comfortable and could go home and lock down for 6 or 7, 8 months. The fact that they weren't compensated, the fact that, you know, they felt like the government is coming down at them. And of course, when we have our foreign aid, the stuff that we give, you know, outside to expand the empire that is the United States, you know, that comes into effect. It's both parties, Republicans and Democrats. It's like, look what Fred Hampton did. He went down and spoke to the poorest of the whites and let them know, like, listen, bro, like, we in the same condition. Like, you poor, I'm poor. Exactly. You know, he found the commonality. He's like, yeah, you may get to navigate this society different because you're white, but we're still poor as fuck. Like, sorry to curse, but we're still poor. You know, like Reagan, someone who was in charge of Reagan campaign, like, he came out and said that you get poor white people to vote against their interests by demonizing the minority groups, by finding other minority groups to demonize and tell them, no, the reason you're poor is because black people over there, is because Mexicans are coming from across the border, it's because we got Puerto Ricans that want statehood, it's because look what Cuba's doing. Like, they demonize other people to make them feel better about themselves. You know, so when you have poor white people thinking they're better than black people, thinking they're better than Latinos, Latinidad people, thinking that they're better than LGBTQ people, of course, it's just the system, and the root evil of it all is capitalism. The people at the top,
that's what Citigroup said in like 2005 or whatever, whenever the leaked memo came out. It's like, we have all the money, but they have the people power, and if they ever figure out, like, and us, if they ever figure out that they have the ability to come together and work together, we're fucked. We're over. We're done. Despite the fact that we have all the money.
So dangerous to them.
Exactly. Look at the
and still are. But the issue is Fred Hampton lost. Capitalism was able to take the school breakfast program and all the good to reduce it into a commodity and sell it back to the people. And this is like the thing with capitalism, right? Marx 250 years ago called it late stage capitalism, and we're still calling it late stage capitalism today. So, you know, I don't know how many police stations need to be burnt down to finally bring an end to capitalism, but there's a number, right? I'm not advocating violence at all. I'm not saying it, but I'm just saying, like, there is a number that is the threshold where, you know, the communities themselves start to realize that, you know, I mean, look, I drive down Melbourne, right? Which, you know, whatever. But there are big billboards in like little local neighborhoods where I grew up in from American Express. It says American Express, shop local. Like American Express in Bentley, right? Shop local.
Pushing that capitalism.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's the bubble. It's the evil that keeps feeding itself.
Jesus. How do we fight against that?
It's hard because
unity is the only way. The only way.
Imagine like the four of us, right? You know, Nick as well. We're going to throw Nick in this scenario. If the four of us, if we wanted to like run for political office here in the United States, we're all leftists, we're all progressives here. We don't have a media apparatus that will back us. You know, centrist Democrats, the Nancy Pelosi, they have the CNN, the MSNBC, they have that. But then you have
the Fox News.
Yeah, and Fox News to an extent, but then you have conservatives like MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Laura Boomer, who are just wild wackos Trump, and they have a whole media apparatus that support their lunacy. When you have Fox News, ONN, and then Newsmax, and the rabbit hole goes down with PragerU and all these online institutions, like YouTube is dominated by right-wing propagandists. You know, like the one thing that like progressive or leftists have done is corner the whole podcast market, is corner the whole like streaming platform like off of Twitch. That's the one thing that progressive have done, but that can't translate into like, well, I can't say it can't, it could translate, but it's hard to translate like a Twitch apparatus or a podcast apparatus into mainstream society, because how many old people know what the hell Twitch is, could download Twitch and like go and like watch or listen to conservative news, you know, I mean, listen to leftist programs.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is the boomers are still the biggest voting bloc, and for many of them, they don't know that the 1970s has actually ended, right? Because and this is the thing, like some people, I mean, I was doing a bit of writing on this yesterday. Maybe I can sort of open it up and look. I mean, I was thinking potentially of a segment we could do, nouns that kill, right? Nouns that kill, and I would like to put one forward immediately in that range, which is you know, unskilled labor. Unskilled labor is a noun that kills. Right, because it just divides the working class into the skilled and the unskilled. And I don't know if you guys have ever been a dish pig in a kitchen at like a function, like a wedding or something. Don't tell me that's unskilled labor. I'm sorry. If you want to be able to get out of that kitchen before 2 a.m., you need some serious skill. Do that.
Absolutely,
right?
Just like a mother at home that has to raise 3 kids by herself, or a mother.
Well, that's the second shift. That's Ali. What's her surname? Ali. I'll have to look that one up. But that Strangers in Their Own Land was the follow-up book to the second shift, which is explaining all this. And then you got Barbara Eichenreich, who talks about like nickel and dimed and stuff like. It's a very complex system that pushes people to the marginalities and uses precarity to discipline them into the labor force, which allows corporations to offer less and less, right? You always want to get more information out of the system than you put in. Information could be money. If I'm running a corporation, I want to get more money out of that corporation than what I put in, right? And that's what the investor class is all about. So to answer your question, Alex, I guess, like, you know, you could think about, or even what you were saying, Hector. Let's say, for example, we won. Let's say the four of us won key Senate races that tipped the balance of the Senate, and now it's like 46 to, or let's say it's 50 to 46, and we're in the middle as the 4 votes. So we can swing anything. The 4 of us working together will swing any policy. And let's say we go full throttle. We're just like, we may not get this opportunity again. We are going to institute communism in the United States. And let's even say we're successful at doing that in the United States. Well, where does all the money go? Right? All the bond market just shifts into the Forex market, and all of a sudden America's a third world country. That's what happens. So how do you stop it? How do you stop globalization?
That's the big key. That's the big question. We're
already so far down that path. It's you know, it's snowballed at this point. You know, it's
yeah. I mean, I don't mean to blackpill you guys. I think it's absolutely worth fighting for every single gain you make, even if that gain can be easily washed away. Like, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, puts in a life of work for, you know, corporate feminism, if you want to call it that, and that's problematic as well. But, you know, she puts in a life's work, holds on as long as she possibly can, dies in the most brazenly hypocritical move. They replace her with Amy Coney Barrett, who just essentially wipes away all the gains that RGB made. Does that mean we should just give up and not try to emulate RBG's success? No. You know, if the pendulum can swing that hard one way, it can swing that hard the other way. And we saw that with the pipeline. What was it? The Keystone Pipeline, right? You know, Trump brought it back in, and then day one, Biden wipes it back out. And so it's the struggle is to find meaning within the struggle and to continue the struggle regardless of the outcome. And I guess that's what I would say on that. I hope that.
Yeah, the fight is, we have to fight. But when I say fight, I think it's more so a psychological battle more than anything else at this point. You know, it's divide and conquer that's been deployed against us here, and it's something that we need to get the majority of people to see and understand.
But it's also too, like, it's a cultural thing too, Fernando. Like, I could what's your background, if you don't mind me asking?
What do you mean?
Like, where your family from?
Oh, well, I'm American. I was born here. My father is Puerto Rican.
Okay.
My mother is she's Hungarian. She was actually born in Switzerland, so Swiss, I guess.
No, but let's use that, because, you know, my family's Puerto Rican as well. So Alex as well, he could attest to this. Alex comes from the Latinidad background as well. Even in our subgroup that makes us Latinidad people, we even have colorism and infighting between us. You know,
why do all Hispanics speak Spanish to begin with? It's something that I think about
all the time.
You know what I mean? It's
why do we cater to that Europe, wanting to be so much to the European style of life? It's like the parallel, if you dig down deep, between like the problem between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. You know, like the whole issue, like Haiti got rid of slavery on the island, but the Dominicans, who were privileged, who were close to whiteness than the Haitians were, felt that the form of slavery that they were under was a little bit better than the form of slavery,
more tolerable, right?
That Haiti was under. That's just like here in the United States. You have rich people in the one that are in the middle class that be like, yeah, I may be getting screwed over, but I got a little better comfort than you do, so I'm not trying to risk what my comfort is just to better your situation.
It's a good example.
When in reality, knowing that, you know, if you uplift the material life of the people at the bottom of society, just automatically the people who are in the middle class, your life is going to be better as well.
And look at what sparked it. Do you know? I mean, do we all know what sparked it?
It was
Haitian independence. They fought for their independence.
Exactly. Haiti was the first free black country.
Black Jacobins.
You know, and American. And when you look at history, and then you study history, and then you actually find out what these wars were fought for, like the American Revolution. when that was happening in Europe was during the time of the Enlightenment. Nick, if I'm getting it wrong, just feel free to cut me off. It was during the time of Enlightenment. That was during the labor movement. That was during Marx and all that.
Post-Enlightenment.
It's
during the time of the rise of capitalism. Like it's difficult because where do you? First of all, the Enlightenment is whitewashing of history to begin with, anyway, because there were serious universities in Africa that predate anything in Europe by a fair way, and also when you think about like what the Enlightenment stood for and what they were all about, is like this. You know what Jordan Peterson and others might say, the beauty of Western civilization is this unique creation where the individual is the smallest unit, and that's what the blah blah blah, like which then if you hear that out of the voice of someone like Nick Fuentes, becomes white people created civilization, and therefore white people need to be proud of their own heritage, and we should continue to freely oppress other people with pride. And it's like, fuck off with that bullshit. But you know, you have to keep in mind that like the Europeans didn't exist unless the Babylonians existed, and the Babylonians didn't exist unless the Africans left Africa. And so we are essentially all African. We are all black, whether we like it or not, right? And I like this expression in the Indigenous peoples community of Australia. They talk about it as coffee, right? You know, you can, and I'm not trying to claim this isn't like a stolen valor situation. Like,
of course, we represent. We recognize that.
I am the whitest of the white in this group, especially. I don't have any claim to any kind of oppressed people. I am the oppressor. And as a cis white man, I am the representation of pure oppression. But, and forgive me, please forgive me. But I do have a little bit of Irish heritage, so that balances it out, right?
Okay, you suffered during the potato famine. You good?
Well, I did personally. My family, a quarter of my family or something did. The other half was German, but we like to call ourselves Danish because of the war and stuff like that. But anyway, all that aside, in Australia, the black community talks about coffee, right? It doesn't matter how much milk you add to coffee; it's still coffee. Right. As soon as you have a single drop of coffee in your coffee, it's coffee. Right. And so you could have a black coffee, you could have a 50-50 split, or you could have a white coffee, and it's all coffee. Right. So I like to think of myself as the whitest of the white coffee, like just milk with just like, you know, the previous person using the cup actually had a coffee in it, and I'm just the milk. The baby Chino. I'm the baby Chino of the coffee family, but it's still, I'm still coffee, right? Because we're all coffee. But what happened is then you had like the Medici family, and if you've ever read Machiavelli and the Prince, that's what that was all about. And the patrons of the arts, which led to the Italian Renaissance. And I'm really summarizing history quickly, but to get back to your point, Hector, and I'm not great with historical timelines myself here, but the Renaissance then led to you know, and all of this also corresponds with the rise of the printing press, the Gutenberg Bible, and all of that. But essentially, you have like the rise of the Calvinist Protestant church corresponding at this time, and then that's the universities developed, and that's the Enlightenment, which, you know, also sort of corresponds with Hobbes and the idea of the Leviathan. Hobbes I got this great book about the Enlightenment, which has a list of all the key figures, and Hobbes is at the very beginning and the very end. The guy lived for like 150, like 90 years, but in our time it would be like 150 years, you know, like he was all over the Enlightenment.
But me bringing up the Enlightenment period was to point out that like the American Revolution was post-Enlightenment period, and at that time, the American Revolution, that war that happened,
100 odd years later, though.
Yeah, that's when the British Crown wanted to get rid of slavery in its colonies. You know, it got rid of slavery and whatever their form of it, and on homeland, but they wanted to get rid of it in its colonies. America's its first colony, it wanted to get rid of it. Americans fought to keep slaves. They didn't. The American colonies.
Yeah, but it's also tied in with the French Revolution, Hector.
Yeah, I was just about to say that
the French and Benjamin Franklin was instrumental in both revolutions. That's important to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, definitely. But the American.
I was just about to ask Nick what he thought about Benjamin Franklin, but my fault. Keep going. Like,
no, I was saying that like the American colonies tried to expand into Canada. You know, and that's when you had the French and Indian War that took place before. The U.S. did not want to pay back the British Crown money that they lost for that expansion that fell. So the American Revolution was around circling, the whole idea of wanting to keep slavery and not wanting to pay back reparations to the British Crown because of the loss of the French and Indian War, not being able to expand into Canada. So when we look at history and really find out why,
hang on. Pump the brakes. What are you talking about? Slavery.
You talking about
American Revolution? We all know this, right? We all know when we pledge allegiance to the flag.
Yeah.
What the revolution was about. It was about taxation without representation.
No.
Slavery. Look,
no, the taxation. But what was
you can't have representation anyway. Of course, you have to pay tax. But you're only 3/5 of a human.
No. What was the taxation was from the French and Indian War.
I know. I'm stirring the pot, Hector. I'm being stupid. I'm making a dumb
maybe
joke.
Take my goddamn mic out, motherfucker. No, but you get the point that I'm saying. So when you look at these wars and find out why they were fought, it makes your stomach turn.
So, all right, hang on. Let me recap because growing up, I grew up in Connecticut as a child, and that's what got me into.
Shout out to Hartford, by the way.
I used to live in Hartford.
Same, yeah.
Me and Fernando were roommates in Hartford. He went to Hartford,
corner of the world.
Right? With Hartford University, right? That's what you went to?
University of Hartford, yeah.
University of Hartford. I'm like, Hartford University doesn't sound right. University of Hartford. Anyway, all right. So I was always taught it was the revolution was about no taxation without representation, and it was about the colonists, or England was taxing the shit out of the colonists, and they were like, yo,
the tea. That's why they threw the tea over the Boston Tea Party.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So that was but what it really was, according to you guys, is they really wanted slavery, and that's the taxation.
That was the main part, and the main parts of like the Stamp Act as well was to tax the colonies if they kept slavery in line. If they kept the system in order, that's what the Stamp Act was for. They didn't want to pay taxes for the Stamp Act, for one, for like official documents going back and forth to the Queen when it comes for like paperwork and not paperwork, but for like money, because the Queen was still using the U.S. colonies to make money. It was capital,
and it was mostly about forced slavery, or like everything,
including... It was everything, but slavery was one of the topics that was a part of it, but people in history, we don't learn that in school, that slavery was one of the reasons that we fought for our independence.
And
also wanted to throw in there, are you referencing Queen Charlotte?
I'm the Queen at time. I don't know her name. Hold on.
Yeah. George III, his wife, Queen Charlotte.
Okay.
Actually, a very interesting woman. You can look into her background.
Okay.
She was not white.
Oh, really?
Yes. Definitely something that you can look into.
Oh.
Just wanted to throw that out there. It's
I love to see
hand in hand with exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. It's just like, I tell my sports fans that Ted Williams is half Mexican. A lot of sports fans don't know that.
It's cool.
I mean, I don't know who Ted Williams is to begin with, so it's all over my head when it comes to that. But I get it. I get like he had to hide his. I heard you yesterday talking about that. And
yeah.
It was beneficial for him in his career to deny that half of his heritage, which is obviously problematic.
So with England at the time, they didn't want slavery, I guess.
They were trying to remove.
They were trying to get rid of.
And the colonists were like, "Nah, we still want slavery
because it was a form of capital."
How they were able to profit and prosper.
And
that's true of all capitalism. I'm sorry. If we go back to the Dutch East India Company, which is the first kind of capitalist company, right? The first stocks were sold, and we talked about this another time. Leading to single tulip bulbs being worth more than a whole house and causing the first stock market crash, right? What was that all about? A private army going to India, stealing and exploiting. It was extraction. It was an extraction economy. And meanwhile, Britain's making all these like, we don't want to be slavery. We don't want anything to do with like slavery anymore. But hell yeah, we're going to colonize Africa.
Oh yeah.
Like I mean, like
it's the empire mentality.
But at least from the American perspective, they were being honest about what it was they were trying
They
to
were
do.
looking at mom and dad, who watched what they had done their entire history, and they were just following suit.
It's
well, hang on, you guys all built your capital and you built your societies and your civilization and your communities off the backs of slavery, and we're just starting out, and now you want us to not have that same advantage that you had. You know, here's your tea. It's now in the Boston River.
Definitely a factor in what happened.
That's how America came about.
Yeah, but you can't admit to that original sin, right? Because as soon as you admit to that original sin, what's the next conversation? Reparations, right?
And then when you look at like the issues of apartheid and Africa and stuff that Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela said, it's they apologize. You know, they had to apologize and admit they're wrong before they could move away from apartheidism. Before apartheidism got straight, they had.
I wish I could do a right-wing Mandela impression for us,
like a Michael Brooks.
Yeah, I wish.
The work of the people is to work. The work of the people is to live. No, but it's America has still not apologized for its original sin of slavery. It still not has apologized for
nor has Australia. It's even worse in Australia because the genocide was much closer to
Tainos of South America, and then when you look at Western expansion, when we expanded to the West Coast to California, there was a time that we had to choose, like, would we go to the West or would we go to South America? We decided not to go to South America because we didn't want to fight the Spaniards.
And
so
the
we decided,
Portuguese, correct?
exactly. We were too scared to. So we was like, you know what? We could genocide the shit out of all these people that live on the West Coast and just take their land, and that's what we did.
Yeah, what's that?
America has been an empire from the beginning.
It's that kid in the hallway, like, that just walks down the hallway with his arms out, and if another country like fart, it's like, is that a socialism fart?
And before Alex and Fernando, before you joined, Hector and I were getting really almost to a point of actually having an argument with each other about harm reduction in the case of like the Biden presidency. And we're talking about the performativity of the Democratic Party, especially in response to something like Black Lives Matter, like turning Pennsylvania Avenue into Black Lives Matter Avenue. On one hand, symbolically, that's important, but on the other hand, you can see it's like throwing chum as bait, rather
it's
than
a
actually
token
doing
move,
anything.
correct?
Yeah,
it doesn't change the actual strict structure. Doesn't do anything for it. Alex, like you work FDNY. I worked 911 for Bronx Lab. How many times while you were working and you encountered the EDP? How many times the EDP were in the back of the bus, but you were told to get out the back of the bus for the cops?
I'm sorry. How many times what?
That you were told to leave the back of the bus because the cops had to control the situation.
It did happen a couple times, but not as much as because with me, I would be like, nah, I'm staying. Like, I'm not going. Like,
that's you. How many other EMTs out there are going to say that like you? Or going to no, like nah. You understand? Like I that happened to me once when we got my partner and I, Johnson, we got kicked. We were working on 17 Ida. We got kicked out of the bus because the EDP was wilding out. So they would say, yo, get out real quick. I didn't want to get to my partner. He was more time on the phone than me. I listened to him. The patient got his ass whooped. Afterwards, they came to us. The lieutenant came to us, was like, all right, on the PCR, you're going to write that the patient fell and hit his face on the sidewalk.
That sounds about right. No, but with me, like, I didn't give a fuck about, like, with the cops would tell me to do some shit. Like, nah, fuck that. Like, I'm staying. Like, I'm fucking, like, I started, like, what's it called? Tying the EDP down with the rats.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm just like, nah, like you guys can fly 5. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I tell them to skedaddle. Like,
you recognize the toxicity that's in that culture.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. There's a lot of like in FDNY and NYPD. There was a lot of Trump people, Trump supporters, and we're a socialist entity. So when I would like try and break that down to them, it would it wouldn't be nice. Like,
are you suggesting though, Hector, that those who work forces are the same as those who burn crosses? What?
You could say back to blue, but then January 6th, the cop gets beat with the American flag.
It's crazy.
People say is unpatriotic for taking a knee, but they got Donald Trump on the American flag scratching his balls. Like,
no, but then let's have the other side of that conversation. Nike exploiting the other side of that as well to make millions of dollars. Yeah.
Just a profit motive. Nike still has how many factories in Asia that are doing child slavery? I mean, child slavery, child labor.
No, it's not Nike's factories. It's the Nike factories and subcontract out to the other factories, who then subcontract out to the child labor. So Nike has no visibility over that.
It's four-way licensing copy.
Yeah, with the cotton that is born in from Africa into Vietnam from the through the forex trades. Yeah. Yeah, so the whole world hang on black hands picking cotton so that we can have clothes.
That's it.
Sucks.
You just got really sad. Thank you so much.
I didn't come in here to black pill us today. I'm just look. We have to acknowledge the broader dynamics that exist beyond the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. Right? There's a rest of the world that exists, and I like to be here to represent that rest of the world. And the American hegemony since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Since Korea, since Vietnam, since Gulf One, Gulf Two, whatever, right? This American hegemony, and this, especially in the 70s, this choice to instead of dealing with the problems of Keynesianism in some kind of a real world manner, no, we'll just go for this neoliberal move. We'll securitize oil and then we'll crush the unions and destroy the unions and allow this kind of, I could directly negotiate with Jeff Bezos because I have leverage over Jeff Bezos, right? When I apply for my job in an Amazon warehouse, right? I don't need a union to represent me. I can do it without dues, right?
That's the ads that they're literally running right now.
Yeah, literally running. Yeah, no, it's gross. It's absolutely disgusting. But that was the choice that was made, and that choice was made because of this problem that we're talking about, which is this complicity in maintaining a culture of silence around, essentially this male behavior, right? This patriarchal, that Alex Jones really does a good job of representing that kind of male behavior and what it is to be the quote unquote alpha male, right? Yeah, and that's what it is. And so there's this real fear that if white people, if the baby chinos like myself were to actually relinquish their power, and hey, what if men were to relinquish their power and we were to have, say, a more matriarchal society, that the Me Too movement would do what the Capitol rioters did, right? And they would turn violent and it would become really messy. So we can't take our foot off the throats of those we are oppressing, because the minute we do, they're going to stand up, they're going to be real mad, and they'll probably kill us. And it all just comes from this fear, and it's not warranted, right? Like you said, Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, they have proven that the constituents of the NCAAP, for example, are not out to seek revenge, right? Fred Hampton wasn't out to seek revenge. He was out to build a community, right? And so the white supremacy, capitalism, and capitalism is an exploitative system, right? The thing is, and this is what I was thinking about yesterday, if you continue to exploit everything to the maximum, if you start saying that like farm hands are unskilled laborers, right? Well, let's do this. What happens if we make it so tough that people don't even get the opportunity to become a farmhand, right? Then what happens to our food supply, right? Bill Gates owning it or not is irrelevant at that point, right? If there are no people actually there to till the soil, to plant the crops, to harvest the crops, we have no food, right? But what happens if we get rid of, like, say, the opposite side, and we just get rid of all the investment bankers around the world? That's what the dynamic is. Capitalism is built off agriculture. And, I'm not going to go there. There's a joke to be made about the Unabomber, right? And the Industrial Revolution being the original sin of humans, and then say, oh, well, it was actually the agricultural revolution, because the agricultural revolution allowed for land ownership and common law around land ownership, which then led to patriarchy. Because if I'm going to give my land to my son, I need to hasn't slept with some other dude, and so my son is actually my son, and there's no DNA test. So the only way to do it is to basically second to her sexuality as an object of my possession, so that I can guarantee that my son is my son and my land goes whatever.
Well, it was like a conversation we had when we were talking about the not the industrial, but the agricultural revolution.
Yeah.
Like, that was the first time ever in history that cattle and all those different animals was hoarded together at one time. And from the
which produced disease.
Exactly. And from the agricultural revolution, we had like the Black Plague. Like, we had like all of those diseases that compacted into it. When you look and you study like indigenous cultures or indigenous communities and how they treated the land and how they curated the land with more respect. Nick, you said like that's a big thing that happens in Australia with the indigenous communities over there. That's one thing that they have. You have to treat the land also. You can't just like, all right, I'm gonna grow tomatoes, but I'm not gonna have the same conditions that tomatoes grow great over there over here. I'm gonna take the seed and grow it here and fuck the conditions. You have to create those conditions, the environmental conditions that will help it grow healthy as well. Not just taking a seed and growing it and boom, it's gonna grow. No, then you kill the soil after 2 or 3 turnarounds.
Yeah, but I mean, they kill the soil. Like, the soil is the topsoil in Australia has become so acidic that regardless of who owns the big hectare farm plots and etc., it doesn't matter. Like, at some point, if we continue going down the path we're going down, we will not be able to grow food in this country.
The U.S. at one point, they owned so many islands. That was because they wanted to have the guano, the fucking bird shit from those islands, because the bird shit will land on rock and harden after a while, and you can use that to treat the soil and like
fertilizer.
Yeah.
So we had ammonium nitrate.
Exactly. So you remember like the goat, like
that's where we get the phrase batshit crazy, because people would actually go to war over batshit.
Yeah, literally, like the U.S. so many islands throughout like literally for batshit, so they could like use that for fertilizer. That is so crazy.
Yeah, you might even say batshit crazy.
Yeah. Oh man, yo, this conversation is amazing. We're gonna end it in a little bit. But before we do, please, in the private chat, like, please put Fernando, I need your IG and stuff so we could link. Nick put it. Alex has yours, so Fernando, you're the only one who's out the loop. But I want to have this to have like a weekly thing. Fernando, if you want to come back, you're more than welcome to come back on. If you want to invite anyone, I want to keep it to like no more than like 7 people, because then like the buffering starts like getting crazy. But I love this. Nick, thank you so much for waking up. I know it's what time is it for you?
No, it was entirely reasonable, man. I was up at, I think, 7:30, which was a little bit of a sleep in for a Sunday. And
wait, 7:30
not compared to yesterday. Well, I got to be on the road at like 6:30 during the week to get to work.
Oh, wow.
So 7:30 is a little bit of a sleeping in that regard. So, but then Cruzy had a couple of cups of coffee and then sat down, and we were good to go. So it's 11:29 a.m.
Wow, it's 7:29 p.m.
Yeah, but you guys are living in the past.
Yeah, Nick.
It's true.
Nick's in the future. That's why I have a VPN, and I don't shut me down, FBI. But I use my VPN in Australia so I can like watch like the shows the day before they come out.
He's watching Tucker Carlson being broadcasted. It's like if you look far enough into space, you can see the light of Jesus, right?
Oh man. But again, thank you, fellas.
Speaking of which, I was gonna like open this up with I was gonna read the actual passage where Moses descends from Mount Sinai.
Well, if you want to read that,
Israelite. Wow, I mean, I haven't my Bible's on the desk. So
okay.
Just because you mentioned CPAC and the whole thing, that really terrifies me. Like, not only was it a golden statue of Donald Trump, but did you see it was wearing board shorts with the American flag?
Mm-hmm. Hey, listen, Donald Trump is supposed to be speaking Sunday night at CPAC. I would be doing a live stream. So if anybody wants to jump in so we could clown him, definitely just let me know.
I think I might have to catch up on that one on the replay.
No problem. I know it's going to be like in the future. It's going to be Monday for you.
I think I might need a pause button on that stream just so every 15 minutes I can like pause, walk away, do some breathing exercises, maybe short meditation, find my Zen, and then come back to it.
Right? I'm not gonna lie, like as much of a horrible human being and disgusting wild person that man, the orange Cheeto was, I do miss his Twitter and the entertainment and the laugh factor of what
he's hilarious.
Like that's something
that's the trap though, right? That's the thing. Is like, okay, but his humor is cheap, right? He doesn't actually have a sense of humor, right? Like, go back and watch the Comedy Central did, right? He was there to laugh when they were paying out all the other guests. Like Snoop Dogg was paying out. What's her name? What's the original before and
Martha Stewart?
Before Sarah Palin. Who was the Ann Coulter?
Yeah.
Oh,
Ann Coulter. Like Snoop Dogg paying out Ann Coulter, or really everyone paying out Ann Coulter. Donald Trump is laughing his head off, but as soon as the jokes are about Donald Trump, and then some real like spicy jokes about Donald Trump liking underage people, I wonder what that put that with the whole. We were, because Hector at the beginning introduced myself, and I explained that I did my master's thesis on conspiracy narratives before I finished it before Pizzagate. But what really annoyed me about Pizzagate is that if you did like a Google search and found the Epstein flight logs to find Bill Clinton's name in it, Donald Trump's name was just the very next one. Right, so you finding your evidence that Bill Clinton was on that flight log.
I did my research, brother.
Yeah, but how good is your research if you can't read down to the next line to see who else was on there?
You need the whole story.
Donald Trump is there just as often, right? And there are some pretty serious lawsuits going on at the moment to that effect. Like, I mean, the whole thing. But
he's named. Donald Trump is actually in court records, like of a lawsuit with Jeffrey Epstein from some 13-year-old, and it literally has like quotes that Trump said, like calling Epstein bastard or whatever. I'm not gonna say it on whatever, but just put in whatever Epstein's religion is and bastard afterwards. That's what Trump was saying the entire time. But
no, look. I mean, we don't have time to get into that, and perhaps we should never get into that, and just let the, just hope that the system is changing enough to support women who have been abused like that. But what I'm sort of pointing to is the whole save the children thing is a big part of like QAnon. It's like the gateway drug to QAnon. And it's all about how Bill Clinton was a sexual predator, right? But then Donald Trump is the savior. Yet all the evidence you have about linking Bill Clinton to Epstein includes Donald Trump. That's my point. So how do you get there? How do you get to say Bill Clinton's a bad guy, and the guy who sat next to him in seat 1B, right? Bill Clinton's in seat 1A, Donald Trump's in seat 1B. He's the savior. right?
Apparently, it's because he wasn't in politics at the time. So apparently, evangelicals will forgive you for whatever you did before you got into politics.
I'm sorry. That is so cheap. That is so
It is.
cheap.
I agree with you. It's horrible.
Like no wonder Jim Baker is making millions off goddamn food. But like that is just we need to follow Fred Hampton's mission to really educate, right? That's what it has. Like, you guys are very smart. You guys are very switched on. But there are some hoods and in other states, you know, who are doing a very bad job of representing American ingenuity and brilliance.
And that's a perfect note just to key off with. I'm gonna let Fernando and Alex say their last pieces before we dip off. Fernando, floor is yours.
I just wanted to thank you guys. I had a good time here, and thanks for having me on, Hector. I'd love to come back another time in the future here.
Definitely, my guy. The invitation is out there. You're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, and thank you, everybody for this cool experience. It's like really, it's cool, like picking each other's brain and seeing different perspectives. And I would just like to end with I want to find a way, and I think Nick, you pretty much answered this, but I want to find a way to unite and just bring about the socialism, so it could help us unite the right with the left, and we can just prosper instead of suffer. And so that's what I want to do. That's like my mission, as hard as it is.
We all want to get to a Star Trek society minus the Federation. Nick just eyeballed me when I brought up Star Trek.
Did you look into that though? Because I think.
No, yeah. I saw what you sent me, but then I was watching other videos when people like actually broke down like the Federation. It's like I get it, Space Army.
Oh yeah, the whole thing. Yeah, the military aspect of it. No,
but industrial complex.
I think look, the argument you were trying to make, Hector, was to do with automation, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the fully gay communist utopia, I think is what it's called, right? That's the manifesto. Fully automated gay communism is what it's called, which is like the Star Trek economy, right? There is no cash. There's just a replicator. You want something, you want a ticket to see the New York Knicks, you press the button, you got the New York Knicks, your front row, right? Maybe it's on the holodeck, maybe it's not, but what difference does it make to you? Distinguish between dreams and reality. So, if you're on the holodeck on the front row sitting next to Jack Nicholson watching the Knicks, that's good, dude, right?
Yeah.
But so the military stuff aside, but I sent you the link to the actual guy. What's his name? Casey, maybe? I'll have to look it up again.
If you don't mind sending me the link again on IG, because my IG messages erase. I don't know why they always delete.
Yeah, I might send it. I might send it to you so you can post it. We need like a website or something so we can post like show notes and stuff.
Yeah, that's in the process. Alex and I started this on the whim, just doing IG conversations, starting it there. And Nick, me and you connected on TikTok and IG, and we here now, and I just love it. Fernando, you part of the family now too. I don't care what you say. You here to stay, baby. So Alex, love you. Nick, Fernando, love you. YouTube, check you guys out later, guys.
All right.